During the 90s, Rwanda was a violent place to be. People of all ages were being murdered, raped, and tortured. The ethnic groups of the nation were against one another. Neighbors and friends died in a genocide as other countries looked the other way. In the end, however, both ethnic groups' basic human rights were ignored by the United Nations' neglect of their responsibilities, and they were not brought to justice in their own ways. But how did all the violence begin in the first place?
There are three ethnic groups of Rwanda: the Tutsi and Twa, who are the minority groups, and the Hutus, who are the majority. During the late 1800s, European leaders came together at the Berlin Conference to divide up Africa into different areas to be controlled. Rwanda was one of the territories given to Germany at the time. Under Germany, the Tutsi, stereotypically lighter-skinned than the other ethnic groups, were put at the top of the hierarchy. This could be tied to the idea of social Darwinism that was being circulated globally around the time. Social Darwinism was at its core an idea that different races were meant to be inferior than others. The Twa, referred to as the forgotten victims of the genocide, due to them being less than 1% of Rwanda's population, are also known as the first inhabitants of the area and often worked as farmers or laborers. Like the Twa, the Hutus were below the Tutsi and were laborers.
All the hierarchy and inequality continued when Belgium occupied Rwanda after World War I. This caused tension between what should have been a unified people. Eventually, in 1959, the Hutus got tired of it and an uprising started. The violence caused Tutsi to flee Rwanda for many years. Rwanda soon after became a republic under the Hutu government in 1961, and a year after that declared independence.
The Rwandan genocide was driven by deep ethnic tensions between the Hutu majority and the Tutsi minority. RTLM, a Rwandan radio company, played a key role in fueling the Rwandan genocide by spreading extreme Hutu propaganda. The station broadcasted messages that were dehumanizing the Tutsi and even referred to them as cockroaches, igniting violence in the land. This was extremely irresponsible of the company, as they purposely drove violence and hate towards an already exiled group. In 1994, after the Rwandan president's plane was shot down, allegedly by the Tutsi, extremist Hutus took control and began a brutal campaign to kill Tutsis and anyone who opposed them.
Over just 100 days, nearly 800,000 people were slaughtered. It was a tragic mix of historical hatred, political unrest, and violent propaganda that led to one of the worst massacres of the 20th century. It's also been reported around 4,000 minors were committing horrors alongside adults. Kids, who weren't even old enough to drive or make any important decisions, participated in the horrors that occurred in the streets. This came back to haunt them in the future as they suffered the consequences.
Survivors recall their time during the genocide and the loss and violence that ensued.
We spent in that bathroom 3 months. And I remember before we came out, I had a dream about Jesus. In a dream he came, I remember he was on the cross, and there was darkness around, as if he was really sad. He said, "My child, when you come out, you will find out that everyone in your family have been killed." And when we came out, as exactly the dream spoke, I found out that everyone in my family have been killed. My neighbors, my schoolmates, 1 million people was killed in a period of 3 months. So I put the rosary down and cried, screamed. And after 5 minutes, I felt like a giant hand of God was holding me.
In the article from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, it shows the multiple times that Rwanda reached out to the UN only to be denied. This goes against the UN's whole purpose and responsibilities as an organization.
The immediate and short-term impact of the genocide made the leaders come to a realization that they should at least address what happened during it. When addressing this in the year 1994, they established the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, or the ICTR.
Its goal was to prosecute the main individuals responsible for orchestrating the genocide, as well as all the other crimes continuing on.
Once the UN finally got involved around 2006, they decided to put all Hutus who participated in violence through court to try and give justice to the Tutsi victims. As they began trials, they realized it would take around 100 years to properly take thousands of guilty Hutus to court to be convicted. As a result, they resorted to the traditional Rwandan court called Gacaca. In Gacaca courts, 3 appointed judges would offer testimony from witnesses and determine their penalty. There were 4 categories for the charges: masterminding genocide, sexual violence, killings, physical assault, and the destruction of Tutsi property. The first 2 charges were put into traditional court, while the other 2 were given penalties. Now, in the thesis we stated that both sides of the genocide were not given justice in their own ways. And yes, the Tutsi were the main victims of cruelty in this situation, but Gacaca wasn't a fully honest system. This is because the only evidence given to the 3 unprofessional judges were word of mouth, and some people were afraid to say things about their former neighbors, friends, and even family members, not to mention all of the Hutu deaths and casualties that were ignored during these trials. And in over 10 years, from 2002 to 2012, Gacaca judges trialed more than 1.9 million cases. By the time the cases finally closed in 2015, a whole 21 years after the ICTR was established, there were 93 completed indictments, which is a minuscule compared to the total number of atrocities.
So, with the Rwandan genocide, over 1/10 of the population was lost, 800,000 people. 1.9 million Hutus were convicted. The whole process of the genocide and court lasted around 20 years, from 1990 to 1994, the Civil War, plus 1996 through 2012 trials.
Over the course of the genocide, thousands of people's natural human rights were neglected. With the massacres of the Tutsis by the Hutus, the UN's decision to ignore those suffering, and the ignorance of the Hutus that were hurt, and much more. As of today, Rwandans remember their loss and grief of the genocide as they try to forgive their neighbors and come to peace with the violence born of hate and discrimination.
The journey of your loved ones is over on earth, but not in heaven. And more than many, you know heaven is real. And your journey is not over yet. And it is up to you how you choose to live your life. If you choose love, I am with you.